Ozempic, Mounjaro, metabolic miracles, right? Or minefields, monsters. Using Ozempic, Mounjaro, or any of these weight loss medications without following what we're about to talk about in this video can end in catastrophe, worse off than you were before. And that's how so many of the users of these medications end up. They don't even believe they need the one thing. They believe they can just DIY it, do it yourself, and it's just a medication and you lose weight, right? Well, add to that the fact that most doctors feel the same way. You just write the script and get out the door, all while you have no idea what sort of black magic you've been cursed with in the form of a fancy modern-day pharmaceutical wonder drug, a curse that could be turned into a miracle with what we lay out here. We're going to go through a maze of truth bombs here, and you might want to cover your ears sometimes because it will get ugly. Just a quick addendum. If you're a patient, please stay with me until the end. I have a special message for you. The early magic, the appetite suppression, reduced food desire, reduced food noise, it's a big deal. It comes from, geek warning, hippocampal GLP-1 signaling. In other words, it tells your brain you're not hungry. It causes delayed gastric emptying, or your stomach doesn't empty so quickly. Calmer glucose swings. All of this works, but usually only temporarily. Your body doesn't see any of this as natural, so over time, it adapts. And the most likely adaptation, geek warning again, upregulating GLP-1 receptors across the entire body. In other words, it takes more of the medication to give you the same result. That's what narcotics do. You got to take more and more to get the same result. And again, for the geeks, it's called restoring the signal gradient that the drug flattened. So that's why appetite suppression fades. And when it does fade, you're stuck with a slower metabolism than you actually started with. And we know that these drugs take a toll on lean mass, muscle mass. Across clinical trials, the amount of muscle lost during drug-induced weight loss ranges anywhere from 40 to 60% of the total weight lost. A few studies report as little as 15%, but again, we're going to talk about that more in the study. 40 to 60%? That's not a side effect. For those that know the importance of muscle, it's metabolic amputation. Losing muscle means lowering your resting metabolism, fewer calories burned at rest or at exercise, and much worse glucose control. Because skeletal muscle is the body's largest glucose sink. What does that mean? It means it's your best safety valve against metabolic disease. It pulls that glucose out of your blood, out of your bloodstream, where it can cause damage in your arteries, and puts it in your muscles where it's safe. So once the appetite suppression wears off, your daily energy expenditure, TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, it's already collapsed to match the artificially low intake you were maintaining while the drug was doing the heavy lifting on appetite suppression. That TDEE, it follows intake. You stop eating, TDEE, energy expenditure drops. Force the body down, it adapts down. And because most people aren't developing real habits, no cooking skills, meal planning skills, those are boring, right? No protein structure, no training routine, well, that's sweaty, so you don't want to do that, right? And no intensity, let's just take a walk around the lake. No lifestyle architecture. They're left with a drug with fading power, a slower metabolism, none of the behaviors needed to maintain anything. Drugs without a plan is not a long-term strategy. It solves the hunger problem, at least temporarily, but not the human problem, not the metabolic problem. And in the real world, this can show up brutally. Let's look at a recent analysis of real-world data, analyzing what happened out there. not in sterile clinical trial settings. A recent analysis followed 130 users who stopped the drugs between 2020 and 2022. 102 of these people were women, 79%. The average age was 46 years, and the starting median weight was 121 kilograms. Medication breakdown, 65%, about two-thirds were on liraglutide, about a third on semaglutide, Ozempic, Wegovy. 71% were managed by their weight management specialists, obesity specializing physicians. The rest were just managed by their primary care docs. Here's what happened by the time people stopped the drug. They lost up to 25% and down to 12% gained. 42% of these people actually gained weight while on the medication. Again, up to 12% weight gain. The average duration of use, 302 days, so about 10 months. The average total weight loss at the time of stopping the drug, 2.25%. And there was a lot of variation. The standard deviation was up over 8%. But think about that for a second. The average total weight loss among all these people was just 2% on these miracle drugs? Miracle? Here's the kicker. Real-world data consistently shows non-responder rates of a quarter to a half, 25 to 56% for liraglutide and 10 to 17% for semaglutide, again, Ozempic, Wegovy, meaning that 1 in 6 or even sometimes 1 in 2 people get nothing. And yet, many still behave as if medication's doing all the work, right? Often eating the same calorie-dense, high glycemic, in other words, foods that cause their blood sugar to go up, and yet many still believe as if the medication is doing all the work. Often eating those same portions, over too larger portions, calorie-dense foods, high glycemic foods, again, the foods that cause your blood sugar to go way up, because they have an illusion that they've got metabolic immunity now on these drugs, not realizing that they're non-responders. In controlled trials, the weight loss curve usually plateaus into a neat V shape before they stop the drug. A V shape where the bottom of the V represents the maximum weight loss using the drug, and then they come off the drug. Once the drug wears off, usually somewhere between 6 and 12 months, essential habits were never formed. The muscle is gone. Glucose handling is now worse because of the loss of the muscle, so people rebound hard, and they don't know what to do besides taking more weight loss medications. At the moment of stopping the drugs in this real-world study group, over half, 51%, were already taking at least one additional anti-obesity weight loss medication. Another one, like metformin, bupropion, topiramate, phentermine, naltrexone. A quarter, or 24%, were started on replacement medications immediately after stopping the GLP-1s, the liraglutide or semaglutide. Over the next year, 12 months, two-thirds, 65% gained weight. Weight regain became more extreme the farther out they went. And of the 75 people who initially lost weight, 49% regained more than their starting weight within 1 year. Half of the responders overshot weight gain, past their pre-medication weight. Some studies try to patch this with metformin transitions. Others use bundles of generic medications. Results vary, from regaining 1/3 of the weight to pushing weight loss deeper for a few extra months, some success, but then the real question isn't cost or access, like so many say, it's probably this. Was the motivation to switch drugs really financial or access, or Or was it an attempt to keep the magic pill effect going without ever building real behavioral change? Because that's what the evidence really shows. Replacement drugs aren't being used as a bridge. They're being used as a crutch. And this is where structured coaching actually matters, not rotating people through a pharmacy carousel. No, giving them what drugs are never going to provide: a system, a structure, a personalized metabolic strategy, someone who actually supervises, accountability, looks at what's happening inside the body, looking at biomarkers, DEXA scan results, glucose tolerance results, fractionation, while the drug is working and when it stops working. So without that, the rebound is not really a maybe. It's the default path. Have you got any clues as to what we do? So you may say, well, are you in that weight loss space? Let me step back for a couple of minutes. We are in heart attack and stroke prevention. The number one cause of heart attacks, strokes, blindness, kidney disease, erectile dysfunction is undiagnosed metabolic disease, diabetes. The number one cause of diabetes, actually there are three causes, two of which we can't do anything about. Age is the number one cause. Number two, genetics. Number three, obesity, too much body fat. And for most people, it's not full-blown obesity. It's just having too much body fat and too little muscle. So at the end of the day, you cannot do what we're doing. You cannot work in cardiovascular prevention, heart attack and stroke prevention, without working all day, every day in managing what we call body composition, body fat versus body muscle. So this is what we do all day. So let's talk for a minute about this quest to keep muscle. It's well known that radical reductions in caloric intake, especially on medications, can cause intense loss of lean muscle mass. Around a third to a half of the weight loss on these medications can be lean muscle mass. And I've had my own arguments with other YouTube creators that, you know what, that doesn't happen just with medication weight loss. That happens with any kind of weight loss. And loss of muscle mass is bad. It's really bad. I agree with that. It reduces blood glucose control because it reduces your metabolic rate, and it leads to a quick rebound when appetite comes back. And there's a ton of research, by the way, that has researched other research to simply say, oh, you know what, if you're losing weight with drugs, we recommend exercise and high protein intake when taking the medications, because that's what prevents lean muscle mass in the first place, right? It's what prevents it with other types of dieting and weight loss. So it must work with the drugs. There are two studies that have actually tested this, though, and let's get into those studies for a minute. The first one's a collection of 3 case reports. We're going to go over that in a few minutes because it shows what you can accomplish: muscle increase during weight loss. But before we do that, let's go to another study. It was built by Big Pharma to investigate exercise in combination with the weight loss drugs. It was a big, big study, the famous one, published in the New England Journal and funded by every pharmaceutical giant you've heard of in this space. Pharmaceutical giants that, guess what? They either had or were planning drugs in this space. AstraZeneca, Boehringer Ingelheim, Eli Lilly with Mounjaro, Merck Sharp and Dohme, Novo Nordisk with Ozempic, Sanofi Aventis. It was called the S-LITE study. These big pharma companies were under major heat because the weight loss had been recognized as a major risk factor for muscle loss. So they knew they had to prove that you could maintain muscle. And they did with this study, the S-LITE study. Here's where things get a little weird, at least at first, Because if you look at the headlines from this study, it looks like the liraglutide, the weight loss drug, didn't cause any meaningful muscle loss at all. But that's only because of one giant design choice that nobody really talked about. Before the interventions even started, everyone was forced onto an 8-week, very low-calorie crash diet, a diet guaranteed to strip lean muscle off of every participant, medication or not. So by the time the actual medication versus exercise versus both phase began, that was at week 7, most of the muscle loss had already happened off camera. This is why liraglutide looks muscle neutral in those charts. It's not neutral. The study just removed the catabolic. Hold on just a second. Sorry about that geek word. Catabolic means it removed the phase where that was breaking down tissue, where you were losing muscle tissue. The study removed that phase before they measured anything. And once you see that, the results just open up. They make so much more sense. Let's get into that study a bit. It was a randomized trial. It was controlled. There were parallel groups, 2 years total duration, 104 weeks. A lot of really good things going for that study. But again, as you'll see as we get deeper into it, they actually proved a couple of things that they really weren't planning to prove or even report on. There were 4 groups: the placebo-only group, the placebo plus supervised exercise group, the medication group, medication only, and medication plus exercise. This was not your typical primary care physician saying, "Oh, go take a walk after dinner." This was intense exercise, an intense intervention. It was legit. Instructor-run program built to meet WHO guidelines. In the exercise-assigned groups, there were 2 supervised sessions each week, 30 minutes, vigorous, intense, indoor interval training, cycling, using those big muscles of your legs with intensity. 15 minutes of circuit training, again, the big muscle groups with intensity. And 2 additional moderate to vigorous individual sessions per week. Heart rates were monitored to confirm intensity. It was flexible but structured, with accountability, instructors modifying volume and intensity to hit the targets. In other words, it preserved muscle because it was real training, not just random activity or taking a walk around the lake. Even on the drugs that normally suppressed appetite, suppressed protein intake, suppressed athletic drive, the right training program was still able to protect lean mass and start pulling that muscle back that had been lost in that crash diet phase that didn't get recorded. So what actually happened once the medications were introduced? The big story is this. Exercise was the only thing that protected lean mass, or again, brought that mass back after that crash diet. And it did so even when participants were on a drug, a weight loss drug. So exercise was able to overcome the weight loss drug. Here's the year-long breakdown after the crash diet phase. Medication only, 0 kilograms of lean mass recovery. No recovery, flat. They lost weight during the drug period. The moment the drug stopped, they regained everything, and often more fat, rebound, than they started with. Exercise-only group, 2 kilograms of lean mass. They got it back. In other words, about a 3.5% increase. This group rebuilt the most muscle by far. They were the only group that truly recovered muscle from that crash diet damage. They worked well while they were supervised, and they regained most of the lost weight and body fat later on. The GLP-1s, the medication plus exercise, 0.5 kilogram of lean mass was gained back, less than a 1% increase. They still gained muscle, which is impressive because the medications normally blunt appetite and protein intake. This group had the best numbers at week 52 in terms of body fat percentage, so it was a good combination at week 52. Again, Remove structure and the results move right back towards baseline. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Exercise partially protected these people. They didn't build nearly as much as the exercise-only group, but they built muscle back. When they stopped the structure, you started seeing the same biological recoil. Now, here's the true lesson of that S-LITE study, that monster study, $30 million funded by Big Pharma to prove that you don't lose muscle on their drugs. It's the part that literally everybody misses. Up to week 52, exercise rebuilt your muscle, 2 kilograms. Exercise plus the medications partially rebuilt muscle, 0.5 kilogram. Medications alone, you didn't build any of that muscle back that you lost during that crash diet phase. Okay, now here's the bomb about this. At week 52, they removed everything, all structure. No more supervision, no more instructors, no more accountability, no more required exercise sessions. They were free. They even took away the smartwatches that were tracking adherence. So both exercise groups were essentially told, okay, you're free now. Do whatever you want. Now, guess what happened? Both exercise groups immediately stopped exercising. Now, how do we know that? The biomarkers. Every single one told the truth. Resting heart rate increased, returned towards baseline, and that only happens when you're deconditioned or the conditioning evaporates. Fat mass climbed right back up, sometimes even higher, often even higher. The moment training stops, caloric burn and muscle-driven glucose disposal, they both dropped. Waist circumference, it rebounded as well. Abdominal fat's going to return the first thing when training ceases. Body fat percentage, it increased. The exercise-only group regained almost all the fat they lost. And this is the exercise-only group. The medication and exercise group, they regained everything, except the portion the drug had suppressed. They missed regaining a lot of their muscle. This pattern is mathematically perfect. There's no ambiguity. There's no alternative explanation. Once the structure disappeared, the exercise stopped. Once the exercise stopped, the metabolic advantages disappeared. Once the metabolic advantages disappeared, the weight and fat returned. The muscle didn't. It wasn't psychology, it's not willpower, and it wasn't personality on these people. It was the study design just showing us the unavoidable truth. Humans don't maintain lifestyle changes without structure. At least these humans. And now the important part. If supervised exercise is removed, medication users look like they're always going to revert to the baseline the exercise was holding them at. Exactly what the study showed is this. The exercise-only group rebounded towards their original body fat percentage. The GLP-1s, the medication and exercise group, rebounded towards the GLP-1 only trajectory. The medication-only group had nothing to fall back on, so they regained the most rapid fat mass once the drug was stopped. So you end up exactly where the forces acting on your body push you. When supervision is removed, only one force remains, your default behavior. And the default behavior of people who enter these drug trials, people with 38% body fat, decades of sedentary habits, low fitness, default for them is not to continue vigorous exercise. So they didn't. They lost the benefits. The regain happened. The rebound happened perfectly, predictably. Math, not moral failure. It's not just that structure matters, but the study itself proved the consequences of removing structure. That was not their plan, but that's what they proved. For permanent long-term solution, the drug is not the solution. You just bounce back after developing tolerance, and you bounce back worse. The workout isn't the solution. Most people that reach this stage have difficulty staying on a routine. Otherwise, they wouldn't have reached the situation that they're in. The diet is not the solution. If you reach the diet to begin with, you're going to have difficulty sticking with a diet plan. A whole encompassing structure is the solution. Remove the structure, everything falls apart. And this is, again, what we do. Because unlike the trial, which ripped away every lifeline at week 52, we provide the one thing that actually prevents collapse, structure that doesn't disappear. Here's what a program that actually works does. Close monitoring instead of we'll see you in 6 months for a refill. Choosing the right medication for the right patient, not guessing. And supervised dosing rather than hoping your pharmacy got it right. Real nutrition programming, that's not so easy, but it protects that lean mass and your weight loss. Exercise programming based on labs, intensity based on you. Weekly case reviews between coaches and clinicians. Medication oversight, dose changes, lab orders, DEXA referrals. DEXA is the thing that measures body fat and muscle. You can get them in most large cities, costs you a couple of $100. And here's the thing, if you can't manage what you don't measure, DEXA is the measurement for what we're talking about, muscle and fat. Ongoing accountability. The study proved this is the key determinant of long-term success. Ongoing structured accountability. They don't hand you a medication and wish you luck. They build the structure the S-LITE trial removed at week 52, the structure that kept people stable. Because this trial showed, by accident, what happens when people are left alone. Everything comes back, except the muscle. Everything collapses. Everything reverts to baseline, unless you have structure, real structure, the kind that doesn't vanish at week 52. So what's possible when the real correct structure is followed? So there are reports on this, and there is a silver lining here. Remember that study we mentioned a few minutes ago when we said we were going to go over it? The case reports? Okay, here's an example of what can happen. And the structure gained by working with a personal physician as a coach and constantly overseeing what's going on. Managing your medicine as well as your lifestyle. Tinsley and Nadolsky. Case reports that break the GLP-1 narrative. Tinsley and Nadolsky is a set of high-resolution clinical case reports from obesity medicine physicians, showing something that the big pharma trials never really captured. With the right protocol, these medications, the users of these medications can preserve and even gain lean mass while losing weight, the best of both worlds. And the pattern across the cases is extremely consistent. Large trials show that a third to a half of weight loss with those medications is lean mass. Not because the drug targets muscle, but because people on those drugs, well, they eat too little protein, they lose the drive to train, and most of all, they don't work out. They don't activate mTOR, geek term. It has to do with muscle activation. And especially for those of us 50 and older, they pile up. These weight loss drugs pile up with what's already happening internal to our body. It's called anabolic resistance, a declining ability for our muscles to grow back or grow stronger. So these weight loss drugs rely entirely on appetite suppression. The drug creates a deficit. The behaviors determine what the body burns. Now, across the reports, the clinicians, the doctors, use the same formula. The reports that showed success, here's the formula. Number 1, high protein in the diet. 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram per day. That's a research-backed range for muscle maintenance. Number 2, structured resistance training. Actual programmed lifting with intensity, not steps, not walking around the lake, not casual activity. Number 3, the medications used as a tool, not the plan for weight loss. The appetite suppression creates the deficit. Protein and training accountability protected the tissue, the muscle. Number 4, DEXA monitoring. Again, you're not going to manage what you're not measuring. You get real-time adjustments based on an objective body composition shift. So the results? Again, this is the shocking part. All these patients preserve lean mass, even during the rapid weight loss induced by the drug. Several patients gained lean mass on these drugs, semaglutide and tirzepatide, Ozempic and Mounjaro, Zepbound and Wegovy. This contradicts the big trials because the big trials never really managed behavior or protein or continued accountability. Fat mass dropped hard while muscle stayed stable or even increased. The author's takeaway is blunt. These drugs don't inherently cause muscle loss. Lack of protein and lack of training do. And when you control these two levers, the protein, the diet, and the training, especially the training, this GLP-1 muscle loss problem disappears. So this is an example of what can happen when you have someone who's really paying attention to you and your metabolism and your body. When you have structure, guidance, and patients have a plan instead of a pill, you might get curious about what it would be like to work with that. Physician-level clinical coaches applying the latest testing techniques, truth from medical literature, medical science, in order to customize a plan that's perfect for you. It fits your goals, your needs, and your abilities. Call us, 859-721-1414, or click the link in the description. Or if you're watching on TV, just hold your phone up like you're going to take a picture of that QR code, and it'll pull you up a link that you can look at. To set up a free, personalized 20-minute introductory call, learn more, or ask to have questions answered, any questions that you have. All right. For my patients, if you're wondering whether this means you should or should not use GLP-1s, let me make this clear. GLP-1s don't replace lifestyle, but they can be very, very helpful if you're struggling with lifestyle and overcoming metabolic disease. So if you're already using GLP-1s, there's no reason to be afraid. Reach out to my team if you have any questions. And I'll remind you, I am still currently using GLP-1s myself. I've used both Ozempic and now more recently tirzepatide. If you're not using them and you're thinking about it, you can reach out as well. We'll help you figure out whether they're a good option for you. And if you really don't want to try them, that's fine. A ton of our folks that could probably benefit from them still don't want to, and for a whole bunch of very, very obvious reasons. For us, it's always the same. Lifestyle is so much more important than any medication. Yes, we will use medications where we think they're appropriate, but the real issue is helping our patient do the lifestyle work that we all know they need to do, and helping them do problem solving in that space. That may include tools like supplements or medications. It may not. As I always say, lifestyle is the king. Anything else is a tool to help.